All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're diving into a really powerful new way of thinking about leadership. It's a framework that pushes us beyond just raw strength and into the world of creative mastery. We're going to challenge that old idea of power as a blunt instrument and instead look at a new model, the leader who doesn't just react to the world, but actually creates it. So let me just start by posing a question to every single leader out there. What if your greatest strength is actually your biggest strategic weakness? The whole idea here is that power without a clear philosophy behind it is just a storm without a center. It's a force that might get you some short-term results, sure, but it could be sowing the seeds of long-term decay. And what's at the core of this? Well, it's the evolution of an archetype. We're moving from the biblical Samson, a symbol of raw, impulsive force, to what we're calling the modern Samson, a philosophical ideal of creative will. This is a huge existential shift, moving from being managed by the world to becoming the architect of your own reality. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll diagnose this crisis of impulsive power. Then, we'll explore the big philosophical pivot toward proactive creation. After that, we'll look at how to transform that raw force into something meaningful, build an architecture of discipline around it, and finally, synthesize it all to become what we call the solar architect. All right, so first things first, we have to really understand the problem. To achieve any kind of self-mastery, we've got to perform a kind of autopsy on this unconscious state of power. And for that, we're going to use the biblical Samson as our case study, the perfect example of unrefined potential. This traditional strong leader, they have some really critical weaknesses. Their actions are driven by gut impulse, not by strategy. They tend to act alone, the sort of loner archetype, which means any victory they have is pretty temporary. And here's the kicker. Their power depends on something external, a symbol like hair, a title, a market condition, which makes it incredibly fragile. It's a gift that can be, as they say, shorn by the hands of the weak. And this right here is the core strategic risk. A leader who is just a lion reacting to provocations, whether from competitors or from friction inside their own company, well, they're not really leading at all. They've already given up their autonomy, their sovereignty. In effect, they are being managed by the very world they're trying to command. So how do we start building a solution? Well, the first major shift comes from the German philosopher Johann Gottlieb Fichte. He offers this radical way to reclaim that lost autonomy. It's a pivot from being a product of your environment to being the actor who actually defines the environment itself.
So Fichte gives us this amazing concept called Tathandlung, which translates to deed action. And the idea is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly profound. Your identity as a leader, your I, isn't some static thing that you are. It's a continuous act that you do. Leadership becomes this relentless assertion of your existence against the resistance of everything that is not you.
And wow, this shift is absolutely fundamental. Your source of power moves from being some external, shaky gift to being an internal, absolute act. You stop just reacting to obstacles, and you start demanding them as a form of strategic resistance. And suddenly, reality is no longer just a world to be inhabited. It becomes a deed to be performed. Really let that sink in for a second. This new kind of leader doesn't just tolerate resistance, they demand it. Market crashes, friction in the organization, these aren't obstacles anymore. They are the stage, the raw quarry from which this leader carves meaning and proves their own freedom. Okay, so asserting your will is a huge first step, but it's only step one. The next stage, and this is where we pull in Nietzsche, is all about the internal alchemy of transforming that raw force into actual meaning. It's about a transformation from an animal to a creator.
Nietzsche lays this out as a kind of three-stage journey. You start as the corporate camel, just carrying the weight of tradition, of KPIs, of all the thou shalts from everyone else. Then you have to become the lion, the rebel, who finally rejects all that and declares, I will. But the journey's not over. You have to become the child, moving beyond just rebellion to actually create entirely new values, a new world, from a place of I am.
So the big question is, how do you actually do this? How do you make this transformation happen? Well, the answer, you might find, is a little paradoxical. It lies in a tool, self-imposed discipline. The vow, but reimagined not as a constraint, but as an architecture for building power. You see, the old idea of a vow, like Samson's, was an external rule that actually made him vulnerable. It was a weakness. But the modern vow, that's something totally different. It's an active, internal tool for mastery.
It's the leader imposing a law on themselves, creating the very structure that focuses and magnifies their power, making sure it can never be shorn away by outside forces.
And this brings us to a really crucial insight. True freedom isn't having unlimited options. That's just chaos. Real freedom is found only in the power to impose a law upon yourself. That discipline, that's the boundary against which your spirit surges. It's the channel that turns scattered energy into a world-shaping laser.
All right, so this is where it all comes together. We're at the climax of our journey, this synthesis of all these ideas into the final, apex form of the leader, what we're calling the solar architect.
So first, this leader has the conqueror's pride. That's the raw strength, the Fichtean will to act, the Nietzschean lion's power to roar, I will.
But that strength alone isn't enough. It has to be fused with the creator's spirit, the wisdom, the vision, the child's ability to create new values and new meaning.
And what do you get when you combine those two forces? You get the final archetype, the world-shaping power of a Roman Caesar, combined with the profound, meaning-giving spirit of a Christ figure. It's strength married to purpose. And what does this leader do? They perform the solar deed. This is the ultimate act of grounding abstract, cold, stellar logic into the real world of human sweat. They don't just have a vision, they drag it down to earth and make it tangible reality. They literally stop being a creature of the market and become its creator. So we're left with this mandate: stop being a creature of your environment and become a creator of values. This path, from reactive force to creative mastery, is a profound internal journey. You are the bridge, you are the walker, and you are the lightning. The only question is, are you ready to illuminate the way?